It was well past midnight when Jordan's shift had begun to drag into that strange, hollow silence that only comes when a fast food restaurant is technically still open but effectively deserted. Outside, the street lamps hummed weakly, casting pale cones of light onto the empty parking lot. Inside, the hum of the fryers was a constant companion, the air heavy with the smell of stale oil. Jordan was alone at the counter. His co-worker, Luis, was mopping the kitchen in the back when the automatic doors slid open without warning. The sound made him jump. At this hour, customers came in maybe once every half hour, and usually only through the drive-thru that a man stepped inside. He didn't seem drunk, but something about him felt off. He was dressed in a thin, oversized coat despite the warmth inside, and his face was partially shadowed by a baseball cap pulled low. His movements were oddly deliberate, as though each step was a conscious choice. Jordan put on his best polite smile. "Hey, welcome to McDonald's. What can I get for you?" The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood just past the door, scanning the dining area slowly, his head turning in stiff increments, eyes glinting under the fluorescent lights. Finally, in a voice that sounded like it had been used for days, the man said, "Just a coffee." Jordan rang it up, fingers feeling oddly clumsy on the touchscreen. The man paid in cash, crumpled, damp bills that smelled faintly of mildew, and took a seat in the farthest booth, near the shadowy corner where the light bulb above had been out for weeks. Jordan poured the coffee, brought it over, and placed it in front of him. The man didn't thank him. He just stared at the steam curling up from the cup, as if it were spelling something in the air. Minutes passed. Luis finished mopping and poked his head out to say he was taking the trash to the dumpster. Jordan nodded, watching him leave through the back door. When he turned back, the booth in the corner was empty, coffee untouched, still steaming. He blinked, scanning the restaurant. There was no sign of the man. The automatic doors hadn't opened again, and the bathroom door was still ajar. A cold ripple crawled up Jordan's spine. He checked under the table, then turned in a slow circle, his own reflection staring back from the glass windows. Outside, the parking lot remained empty. When Luis came back in, Jordan asked him if he'd seen anyone leave. Luis frowned. No one was out there. Just the trash bins and, he hesitated, looking unsettled. "Never mind." But Jordan pressed him, and finally Luis said, "I thought I saw someone standing in the corner by the dumpster, but when I looked again, it was just gone." The fryers hissed in the background, and somewhere near the front, the automatic doors whispered open again, though neither of them had touched them. The rest of the shift passed in uneasy silence. Jordan found himself glancing at the corner booth every few minutes, half expecting the man to be sitting there again, watching. But the booth remained empty, the coffee growing cold and dark. Near closing time, Luis finally broke the tension. "You know," he said quietly, "there's a reason no one likes doing night shifts here." Jordan looked at him, waiting. "It's not just drunks and weirdos. There's something about the dumpster. People say you shouldn't go near it alone after midnight." Jordan forced a laugh, though his skin prickled. "Like what? Rats?" Luis didn't answer. When they stepped outside to break down the cardboard boxes, the air felt wrong. Too still, too heavy. The dumpsters loomed against the back fence, massive and black in the half-light. Jordan lifted the lid, and the smell hit him immediately. Not just rotting food, but something sour and metallic. He tossed the cardboard in quickly, eager to step back, but froze when he heard it. A faint scraping sound from deep inside. It wasn't the scurrying of rats. It was slower, almost deliberate. "Luis," Jordan whispered. But Luis wasn't looking at the dumpster. His eyes were locked on the far corner of the lot, where the shadows pooled thickest. "He's there," Luis murmured. Jordan turned, and for just a split second, he thought he saw the man from earlier. Same oversized coat, same hat, but now his posture was wrong. Too stiff, head tilted at an unnatural angle. Then, with a subtle flicker, he wasn't there anymore. The space was empty again, the only movement a loose McDonald's bag drifting in the wind. They hurried back inside, bolting the back door. Jordan tried to shake it off, convincing himself it was fatigue, shadows, and suggestion. But when he went to pour himself a drink before closing, he noticed something chilling. The untouched coffee cup was gone. In its place sat a folded napkin, slightly damp, with a single word written in shaky ink: "Stay." That night, Jordan couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the man's slow, deliberate scan of the dining area, the scrape inside the dumpster, the impossible way he'd vanished. Every creak of his apartment felt like a footstep just outside his door. And in the haze between waking and sleeping, he swore he could smell coffee. The next day, Jordan came in early for his shift. He hadn't planned to. Sleep had been impossible, his mind running laps around the previous night. Luis was already there, leaning on the counter with a paper cup of coffee that smelled far too bitter to be the free employee brew. His eyes were red-rimmed, and Jordan could tell he hadn't slept much either. "I was thinking," Luis said quietly, "we should check the cameras." Jordan hesitated. The store manager was notoriously protective of the security system, but Luis waved a keycard. "She's not here until Monday. I have access." The small security office was cramped, lined with shelves of old cleaning supplies and stacks of unclaimed lost and found items. The camera monitors flickered in grainy black and white, covering every angle. The counter, the dining area, the parking lot, the back lot by the dumpsters, even the play area outside. Luis rewound the footage to the moment they'd first seen the strange man. Jordan leaned closer, his skin prickling before anything even appeared. There he was, walking in slow, deliberate steps toward the counter. But something was off in the playback. Each frame showed his movement subtly wrong, like his arms didn't swing naturally, or his head turned a fraction too far between moments. As Jordan watched the man stand in the corner booth, the screen flickered, not once, but repeatedly, almost like interference, but only around him. The background remained sharp. And then, in a moment that made Jordan's stomach knot, the footage skipped forward 10 seconds, and the man was gone, mid-blink, leaving the steaming coffee behind. Luis rewound again, this time to when they'd gone out to the dumpsters. They watched themselves stepping into frame, Jordan lifting the lid, then both of them snapping their heads toward the corner of the lot. On camera, the man was there. Only he wasn't standing. He was crouched low to the ground, arms and legs folded unnaturally tight, his face angled upward toward them in a frozen smile that looked far too wide. And in the next frame, he was simply gone, the shadow swallowing the spot where he'd been. They sat in silence for a long time after that. The hum of the monitors was the only sound. Finally, Luis spoke. "You know that dumpster rumor? People say it's not trash that disappears in there. Sometimes it's people." He didn't elaborate, and Jordan didn't ask. But when he left that night, he avoided the back lot entirely. And still, as he walked to his car, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was crouched just behind the dumpster, smiling at him from the dark. Jordan's apartment was small, one bedroom, a narrow kitchen, and a view of the parking lot below that was more rusted cars than actual scenery. Normally, it was his safe place, where the smells of fryer oil and burnt coffee finally faded from his clothes. But that night, something felt wrong from the moment he stepped inside. The air was colder than usual, and the faint hum of the fridge seemed distant, muffled, like someone had placed thick fabric over his ears. He tried to shake it off, tossing his keys on the counter and making for the shower, but the uneasy silence clung to him like static. Halfway through rinsing shampoo from his hair, the bathroom light flickered. It was brief, but enough to make his heart jolt. The second flicker was longer, and the third left him in complete darkness. He stood frozen, water rushing over his face, straining to hear any sound beyond the hiss of the shower. That's when he heard it. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Not from the door, but from somewhere inside the apartment that he shut off the water and listened. The knocks came again, louder now, from the living room. Jordan grabbed a towel and crept toward the doorway, the darkness pressing in on every side. The light from the street lamps outside barely reached through the thin curtains, casting faint silver bars across the carpet. In the dim glow, he could just make out his kitchen counter and something sitting on it. It was a McDonald's coffee cup. Steam curled faintly from the lid. Jordan didn't touch it. He didn't have to. Even from across the room, he could smell it. That same faint, sour scent of mildew from the man's crumpled bills. His hands trembled as he reached for his phone, but the screen refused to turn on. In the reflection of the black glass, he caught movement. A figure in the corner of the living room, crouched low, just like in the security footage. His eyes adjusted enough to see the faint outline of a baseball cap, the pale curve of a grin. The lights came back on all at once. The corner was empty. The coffee cup was gone, but in its place was a folded napkin, damp and wrinkled, with 2 words this time: "You're next." Jordan sat on the floor for a long time, towel still wrapped around him, the sound of the knocks replaying in his head until dawn. Jordan didn't go to work the next day. He called in sick, his voice hoarse from a night of almost no sleep. The napkin sat on his kitchen table like a warning he couldn't throw away. Every time he glanced at it, his chest tightened, not just from fear, but from a growing, irrational certainty that if he destroyed it, something worse would happen. By mid-afternoon, he decided he couldn't just sit and wait. If this thing wanted him, he needed to know why. And the only place to start was the McDonald's itself. The restaurant was quiet when he arrived, the lunch rush long over. He asked for Luis, but the cashier shook her head. He wasn't in today. Jordan felt a prickle along the back of his neck, but pushed it down and slipped into the staff area, heading straight for the security office. He remembered Luis's key card from the other night, and, after a moment of fumbling through drawers, found it tucked inside a takeout bag. The monitors blinked to life, the timestamp on the most recent footage reading 3:17 a.m., hours after the store had closed. He played it. The grainy feed showed the back lot, dumpsters bathed in the dull glow of the security light. Then the man appeared, not walking in, but stepping into frame from the side, as if he'd been standing just outside the edge of the camera's vision the entire time. He crouched again, folding in on himself, and began rocking, forward and back, forward and back. After several minutes, he rose in one jerking motion and looked straight into the lens. Jordan's stomach turned. The grin was wider now, impossibly so, and the eyes were milky, unfocused, yet somehow aware. Jordan rewound the footage several times before noticing something he'd missed: a shadow behind the dumpsters, taller than the man, unmoving. It wasn't shaped like a person, more like a doorway, cut out of the darkness itself. The man glanced back at it once, then walked toward it, vanishing the moment he reached its edge. The camera feed ended abruptly. The timestamp had jumped forward exactly 1 week. No footage in between. No explanation. Just a gap. That night, Jordan couldn't stop thinking about that missing week. If the system hadn't malfunctioned, then whatever was in that footage had erased it. And the more he thought about it, the more a sickening thought rooted in his mind. What if the man in the oversized coat wasn't the only thing coming out of that shadow? Jordan hadn't heard from Luis in 3 days. Every call went straight to voicemail, every text left on read. By the 4th day, Jordan considered calling the police, but what would he say? My coworker might be missing because of a creepy man who steps out of shadows near a dumpster wasn't going to get far. He was halfway through drafting a message when his phone buzzed. A text from Luis. Meet me at work. Midnight. No explanation. No emoji. Just that. When Jordan arrived, the restaurant was dark except for the soft glow from the fryers in the kitchen. Luis stood near the front counter, hands shoved deep in his hoodie pockets, staring out the window into the empty parking lot. Where have you been? Jordan asked. Luis didn't answer right away, just kept staring. Finally, without looking at him, he said, I've seen where he goes. His voice was flat, like he was reciting something from memory. It's not just the dumpster. There's a place under it. Or behind it. Hard to tell. Jordan's stomach tightened. And you went there? Luis turned toward him slowly. In the dim light, his face looked pale, almost waxy, like he hadn't been outside in days. His eyes were ringed in deep shadows, but there was something else. His pupils were too large, swallowing almost all the color. You should come with me, Luis said. He wants to meet you. Jordan took a step back. That's when he noticed Luis's hands, both still in his hoodie pockets, but twitching subtly, like the fingers were curling and uncurling in uneven rhythms. He thought about the man's crouched, rocking posture and felt his throat tighten. I don't think that's a good idea, Jordan said carefully. Luis smiled, but it was small, wrong, more like a reflex than an expression. You'll come, he murmured. It's easier if you don't fight. The fryers hissed softly behind them, filling the silence. Then Luis took a slow step forward, and in that moment, Jordan swore he heard something else, something faint, coming from outside. 3 deliberate knocks against the glass door, exactly like the ones he'd heard in his apartment. When Jordan glanced toward the sound, the parking lot was empty, except for the far corner near the dumpsters, where a shadow darker than the rest waited, pulsing faintly, as if breathing. Jordan didn't remember agreeing to go. One moment, he was standing in the quiet McDonald's with Luis staring at him, the faint hiss of the fryers filling the air. The next, he was outside, the night pressing close and heavy. Luis walked ahead without looking back, his hands still buried in his hoodie pockets, heading straight for the dumpsters. The security light above flickered once, then died, leaving the lot in near total darkness. Jordan's breath came quick, his mind screaming to turn back, but his legs carried him forward as though pulled. They stopped in front of the dumpsters. Luis didn't speak, just stepped aside, revealing the shape behind them. It was darker than anything Jordan had ever seen, so black it seemed to swallow the faint glow from the street lamps. Its edges weren't quite straight. They shimmered faintly, bending the space around them. Jordan's stomach turned as his eyes tried to make sense of it. He realized with a cold lurch that it wasn't flat. It had depth. A passage, but not into any place he recognized. The air around it was cold, and it smelled faintly of wet concrete and coffee. Luis stepped toward it without hesitation. Jordan reached out to grab him, but his fingers closed on nothing. Luis was already gone, swallowed in one smooth motion. The shadow rippled faintly where he'd been, then stilled. Jordan stood frozen, the sound of his own heartbeat deafening in the silence. And then, from deep within, a faint shuffle of footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Getting closer, a hand emerged first, long, pale fingers curling out of the dark like they were feeling the air. Then the rest of him stepped forward, the man in the oversized coat, his head still angled downward under the brim of the cap. But here, up close, Jordan saw details he hadn't before. The coat's fabric was damp and smelled faintly of mold, and his skin was unnaturally smooth, like wax left in the sun. The grin hadn't changed, though. It stretched impossibly wide, teeth small and uniform like a doll's. He raised one hand and gestured for Jordan to follow. Jordan's body screamed at him to run, but his feet shifted forward, the air around the doorway pulling at him with invisible force. He was just a step away from the darkness when something caught his eye. On the ground beside the shadow, barely visible in the gloom, lay a McDonald's name tag. The letters were faded, but he could still read it. Mark, assistant manager. The metal was bent and scratched, as if something had tried to claw it. And just as he bent to pick it up, the man's hand closed around his wrist. The man's grip was cold, not like ice, but like something that had never been alive. Jordan tried to pull back, but the strength in those pale fingers was absolute. One step, and the night air was gone. The world blinked, replaced by something else. An endless corridor, damp and narrow, the walls made of rough, stained concrete that wept slow streams of water. The air smelled of mildew, fryer grease, and old coffee. The light was dim and sour, coming from nowhere Jordan could see, as if the walls themselves gave off a sickly yellow glow. The man let go of his wrist and began walking, his steps echoing too loud for such a confined space. Jordan followed, though every nerve screamed to turn back. The corridor stretched forward, turning and bending at odd angles, sometimes narrowing so much that his shoulders brushed both walls. The further they went, the colder it became, until Jordan's breath puffed out in faint clouds. Somewhere far ahead, faint noises echoed, metallic clanks, a soft, rhythmic thumping, and something that sounded like muffled voices. They passed doorways, dozens of them, set into the walls at uneven heights. Some were so low they'd require crawling to enter. Others were tall, but impossibly thin, like cracks in reality. Most were sealed shut, but a few stood slightly ajar. Jordan risked peeking into one and instantly regretted it. Inside was a small room, lit by a flickering McDonald's menu board mounted crookedly on the wall. In the center sat a booth table, bolted to the floor. Someone was in the booth, sitting perfectly still, head bowed. Their skin was pale and waxy, their McDonald's uniform rotting and damp. When Jordan stepped back, the figure's head turned slightly, too slowly, following him without lifting its chin. The man in the coat never looked back, never spoke. They kept walking until they reached a wider space where the corridor opened into what looked disturbingly like the back of a McDonald's kitchen, but wrong. The fryers stood cold and empty, the counter was warped and waterlogged, and in the corner, a pile of objects shimmered faintly in the dim light. Jordan stepped closer and realized they were name tags, hundreds of them, each bent, scratched, and streaked with what looked like rust but smelled like blood. On top of the pile was one with fresh black ink across it. Jordan, crew member. Something moved in the far shadows, behind the warped counter. A shape, taller than the man in the coat. Broader. Watching. The man in the oversized coat stopped in the middle of the warped kitchen. He didn't turn to face Jordan, just tilted his head slightly, as if listening to something only he could hear. The larger shadow behind the counter shifted, its outline bending in ways that made Jordan's eyes ache. Then, slowly, it stepped forward. It wasn't a person. It wasn't even shaped like one. Its form was tall enough to brush the ceiling, a hunched, elongated mass with limbs that seemed to stretch and coil at will. Its skin, or whatever covered it, looked like the same wet, stained concrete as the walls, veined with faint yellow light that pulsed in rhythm with the sound of Jordan's heartbeat. That IT moved without sound, gliding more than stepping, the air around it growing colder with each inch it closed. When it leaned forward over the counter, Jordan finally saw its face, or faces. Dozens of them, pressed into its surface like they were embedded in wet clay. Pale, open-mouthed, some with eyes shut tight, others wide and glassy. They shifted slowly, almost imperceptibly, as if trapped in the act of screaming. Jordan's stomach twisted when he spotted one face he recognized. Luis. Its mouth open, eyes half-lidded, the faintest twitch moving his lips. The man in the coat finally turned toward Jordan, and for the first time, he spoke. His voice was dry and hollow, like wind through a narrow pipe. "It feeds on what you bring it," he said. "Memories. Faces. You." His grin never faltered, even as the larger thing reached out a massive, concrete-textured hand, each finger ending in a blunt, crumbling tip that left wet stains on the counter. The room's yellow glow dimmed, leaving everything in near darkness except for the pulsing light from the thing's veins. Jordan stumbled back, bumping into the mound of bent name tags. They rattled like bones, and the sound made the larger figure tilt its head sharply toward him. The pulsing veins brightened, and a deep, resonant sound filled the air, a low vibration that Jordan felt more in his chest than in his ears. It was calling to him, and every instinct screamed that if it touched him, he'd end up pressed into its surface forever. The man in the coat stepped aside, gesturing toward the corridor they'd come from. "Go," he said, though his tone carried no urgency, only inevitability. "But you'll find your way back. They always do." Behind him, the larger thing began to unfold itself, rising to its full, impossible height, its faces shifting in silent screams. Jordan ran. Jordan didn't remember running through the corridor, only the constant scraping of his shoes on wet concrete and the sickly yellow glow that seemed to follow no matter how many turns he took. Doors passed in his peripheral vision, each cracked open just enough for pale faces to watch him as he fled. The air thickened, pressing against his chest, until he felt like he was moving through water. Somewhere far behind, the deep vibration of the larger thing still resonated, slower now, but steady, like a heartbeat marking his path. The shadow doorway appeared ahead, rippling faintly. He didn't think. He threw himself at it, bursting into the cool night air of the McDonald's back lot. The dumpsters stood silent, the chain-link fence rattling softly in the wind. For a moment, he thought he was free. Then he saw the coffee cup sitting neatly in the middle of the pavement. Steam rose from it in delicate curls. The smell of mildew hit him hard enough to make him stumble. He backed away, eyes scanning the lot, but it was empty. The door to the restaurant hung half open, light spilling onto the asphalt. Inside, everything looked normal: clean floors, humming fryers, bright menu boards. Almost comforting. He stepped inside, drawn by the illusion of normalcy. The moment the door shut behind him, the lights flickered once, then steadied. The store was silent. Every seat in the dining area was occupied. The people in them wore McDonald's uniforms, their heads bowed. Their skin was waxy, pale. None of them moved. At the counter stood the man in the oversized coat, grinning that same unbroken grin. He slid something across the surface toward Jordan. It was a name tag, fresh, untarnished, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Jordan, shift manager. Behind the counter, the shadows deepened, rippling faintly like water over something vast. The man's voice was soft, almost kind. "It's your turn now." Jordan's hands shook as he took a step back, but his heel caught on the tile edge, and in that split second, the world shifted again. The hiss of the fryers turned into the distant hum of the concrete corridors. The smell of mildew was everywhere, and when he looked down, the name tag was already pinned to his shirt.